Okay, nice. We are now on FB. Good morning, guys. Everyone there on Facebook. So happy you can join us again today. If you have been with us before, and those who are new with us, welcome and thank you for making time. We have a panel of 4 people today, and one of them will be coming at 11:30. I'm happy now to hand over this session to Matt from Someway Group, who will be moderating this session and taking it on for the rest of the hour. So I thank you again, Matt and Subhash, with us, and I won't take any more time here. Happy to hand it to you. So, Matt, we can,
Yeah.
if you're okay, to just kick this.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Roslyn and team in Magic for organizing this. And good morning to everyone who's in this session today. So it's going to be a very relaxed session, or I intend to make it very much like a kopitiam session. So hopefully you have your own favorite coffee or tea with you, and hopefully we just have an interactive chit chat with the esteemed panelists today, and please feel free to chip in, put your questions in the chat, or unmute yourself and ask the question. Up to you, really. So we're going to talk today about one of my favorite subjects, which is really the tango or the dance between startups and corporates. And we're going to talk a little bit of, from the corporate perspective on, what strategies they have on interacting with startups, what strategies they have on doing internal innovation and culture that is required to execute on that. And as well as on the sort of mechanisms and tools that they have to invest in startups. So I intend to break this session up in 2 parts. So the first part, we talk more about innovation from the inside out, from the corporate perspective. So again, talking more about, digitalization and digitization from a corporate perspective, and how that helps them to accelerate, digital transformation projects, right? And in the second part, we talk more about innovation from the outside in. So think about, corporate venture capital arms or investments that corporates makes in VC funds, as well as accelerators, right? And how that then, works for startups, right? And so we're gonna, again, keep it fairly open, but before I start, of course, let me just ask my esteemed panelists to introduce themselves very quickly. So maybe starting with you, Peter.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Nice meeting you online. I wish it was face-to-face. But just a quick introduction. I am a member of MBAN, and I'm also a current council member at the Malaysian Business Angel Network. On the other side, I'm also a partner in Nexia, early stage venture capitalist company, and we do accelerator programs. And I particular am in charge of the consulting side, when I do quite a bit of corporate innovation, if you like, consulting for some companies. Quick background, I used to work in PwC, and also I was the MD for Rico in my early years. Now I'm doing quite a bit of coaching and also do quite a bit of work for MBAN. So that's a quick introduction of me. Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, Peter. Subhash?
Hi, thanks, Matt. So I started my career in Accenture, and I think as a consultant, that carried on as few other companies in the consulting basis. And the most recent experience, I think the most relevant for today's session is in Maybank. I was head of innovation and design. It was it's a team that we set up back in 2014, and it was to execute innovation for the Maybank Group. So I was there about for 5 years, but more recently now, my career is shifted focus more onto Agile. So I'm certified Agile coach, and I've left Maybank since then, about a few months back, And now I'm on my own as an agile coach for a lot of different organizations. So that's in a nutshell.
Thanks, Subhash. So really great to have you both here. A lot of experience from a corporate side, consulting side, and I think what both of you have in common now is that you are doing a lot of giving back, right? And coaching next generation of entrepreneurs, as well as coaching some of the corporates, which is also very much needed. I completely forgot to introduce myself just now. So I'm the Chief Innovation Officer in Sunway Group. And one of the initiatives we started 4 years ago now is the Sunway Innovation Labs. So under the Sunway iLabs, we have an accelerator program. We do a lot of entrepreneurship education. We run hackathons. We run industry challenges within our own corporates. And we also have our own corporate venture capital arm called Sunseed Capital. So we do make investments into startups all the way up to like A to B rounds of venture capital investments. So that's me. And yeah, really happy to be here. And then again, before I start, I also just wanted to say a little bit from MBAN. So I'm also a council member in the Malaysian Business Angel Network, or MBAN. So of course, we do a lot of work in terms of matching angel investors and startups and education around that. But one of our latest chapters that especially Peter and I are very much involved in is just how do we bring the corporates into this ecosystem, right? How do we get corporates to invest into startups, maybe alongside the angels and VCs? And so the way we do that is we do that through education. We do, provide networking opportunities for corporates. And finally, we provide them the tools, right, to actually make these investments into startups, which I know it can be very scary at the beginning, but I think it's at the end of the day, it's all about experimentation, getting started before you get good at something. So with that, let's get started. So are you ready, guys, for the questions? So let's start a little bit about. Let's talk a little bit about the title, right? Realigning strategies, digitization, and it's something that before the panel we had a little bit of a discussion about. Well, what is digitization, right? And what is the difference between digitalization or digital transformation? And sometimes people use them, between each other, right? And not really understanding what's the definition of that. So let's try to talk a bit about definitions. Maybe Peter, starting with you, what does digitization mean to you, and how do you use this term versus digitalization?
Okay, thanks, Matt. Yeah, I think it's not just a word play, but actually it connotes different things, right? When we say digitization, when I was running Rico, that was what we were very strong in, digitization. Rico, as you know, is an IT company, we call it now, but it was very much a photocopying company, right? You may use a Rico machine before, and so we have got hard copies of whatever it is, right? And then we said, hey, you know what? We will help you to digitize your workflow. Yeah. So from, say, for example, you got hard copies into digital, into Excel, and maybe help you categorize this. So to me, that is digitization. Digitization to make you a bit more efficient in what you do. To me, digitalization gives me the impression that it is a change in the way we do business. Yeah? Say, for example, if I am selling something which is on a manual basis, as you know, COVID has happened, a lot of us have on board our own businesses into the online space, right? So to me, that is digitalization, not digitization. Okay, I think that's my own simple view.
Yeah, so the digitization is more, turning analog into digits, into bits, and then digitalization are the business models that come around that, right? To have a data strategy and things like that. Okay, so Subhash, any other views from your side on this?
Yeah, kind of similar to what Peter said. Definition-wise, that's how it would differ. But Yeah, I mean, one area where the confusion can happen is that people assume that when they do digitization, they're already on the path for digitalization, and that can be misleading because not getting a form, for example, to become an online version of it doesn't mean that you're on a business model change shift. It is just that, it's almost like a hygiene factor. You have to digitalize stuff, right? You have to convert manual forms. And if you haven't already, you should be considering it. But a digital journey for an organization is a very much different thing because you need to change how you operate, how you generate revenue. So all of those changes.
Yeah. Thanks for that. And so we may have misled the audience already, like to put digitization in the title, but I think really for this panel we talk more about the much broader digital strategy, digital transformation strategies within corporates. So okay, let's move on from there. So I mean, staying with you, Subhash, how do you see that digitalization and digital strategies fit within corporate business strategies, and how have you seen those change over the last 2 years when the pandemic started?
I guess it's an absolute must now. I think in any industry right now, you have to already start considering how digitalization is going to happen within your space. I mean, even from legal to accounting to banking, any sort of industry you're in now, you can't avoid it. But what I've seen so far, I think in the organizations I've worked with, or partnered with, the strategy is already in place. There is some sort of blueprint per se. There's also some sort of thinking on how they can move. So most organizations are starting it in parallel with their existing business. So there will be a small portion which starts a digital journey, and then they will then take a bigger pie of the revenue as they grow. But of course, as any organization, the first thing you need to think about when you start a journey like this is there will be internal cannibalization, because as you start a digital journey and you move revenue online, you are going to eat up your traditional businesses, revenue from your traditional business. So you need to think about how you're going to play that, make it a fair game, right, between both.
Yeah. Do you have any examples of that, of how that has cannibalized for any particular business lines or industries?
I guess a classic example is in insurance, right? If you look at any insurance organization right now, a lot of digitalization is focused on general insurance. So you know how you sell auto insurance and things like that, because that's the easiest, right? But they are in the midst of considering how life insurance can be sold online. But most insurance companies are run mainly using an agency model, where you have a lot of agencies and agents, life insurance agents, who are paid on commission to sell life insurance. Now, if you went completely online and sold whatever products that you have online at the same time, a customer may choose to come online to buy it instead of referring to an agent or going to an agent, right? So you are going to cannibalize your existing business line. So how would you do that, right? So right now, maybe you can have a fair share where auto insurance, because the commissions are not that high, the agencies may choose, you know what, it's okay. Auto insurance, I don't want to sell. You know, if it doesn't really hurt me much, you can go online. But the moment you start touching life insurance, the sole bread and butter of most agencies, that is when that contention is going to happen, right? Of cannibalization.
Yeah. Thanks. And maybe Peter, have you seen things change like recently over the last 2 years, like with the pandemic happening?
Definitely. If you look at even, let's say, in the printing industry, right? When I was running, and even now, there is a lot of conflict in that industry. Say, for example, I'm selling you a photocopier, right? Because you need to photocopy. But of course, how much photocopy do you make nowadays, right? So what do? We normally use our phone to do scanning. So a lot of the copiers now are being used to scan, right? So the revenues of a copier company would actually be shattered or even be traumatized by it, right? So what organizations would do probably would say, hey, you know what? Can I sell scanning services? So you can see there is a tension between I want you to photocopy more. Let's say Subhash is selling scanning services, which I need to sell. Then there is an internal conflict, right? So this is a real conflict, and the question is that how do we identify this conflict and address this conflict? So this is one of the real world things that we see happening relating to digitalization in that sense.
Okay. Someone actually commented here from Facebook, Wilmy, who actually says that the biggest challenge in Malaysia when it comes to digitization is language, and that's still many people don't understand English, right? And but that's one of the main hurdles. I mean, we like to say in Sunway or in iLabs that we speak at least 4 languages, maybe not the natural language, but we speak the language of corporates, startups, students, and investors, right? That is a challenge in itself because that is a completely different language. But do you guys see that as a hurdle, that English in Malaysia is a challenge when it comes to digitization or digitalization? Any of you?
To an extent, yeah, I'm pretty sure to an extent it is a challenge. I think when you go into more rural communities, I mean, if you look at the banking and the financial sector, we're always trying to tap the unbanked, and we're trying to get them to open a bank account, the most basic need, right? So when you try to reach these communities, language may be an issue, where they are more comfortable talking in the language that they're most comfortable with. So you kind of and that's where digitization or digitalization may face some issues, because the human touch does a better job, right? Where if you have, just going back to the same example before, if I had an agent who spoke the local language and who can relate to you because he's from the same place where you lived, and and he can talk to you at a kopitiam, for example, he can do a better job at selling you that product as opposed to you just going onto a website and looking at the details of and I mean, it could be a fantastic website. The UI UX journey could be brilliant, right? But yet it may not cater for the need that individual, because one main reason could be the language barrier.
Yeah,
I think looking at it, Subhash, I coach quite a few of the startups. When they want to see any opportunity, you just go to any site which is a complaint site. Then you'll get a lot of business opportunities, and one of them has even looked at how do you have this conversion between Bahasa and English, and even the Chinese ones. So they are trying to address that gap, which Subhash is saying. But of course, it's not always easy to have the machine language to translate into the local slangs. You say tomatoes, I say tomatoes. That's your. But that is the English bit. Can you imagine? Is on the local languages that we have, the ethnic languages.
Yeah. I mean, as a foreigner in Malaysia myself, been here for 12 years, it's quite embarrassing that I still don't speak much Bahasa really, but it is the other side of the struggle for myself when dealing with government agencies or like civil service for immigration issues and that sort of things to translate documents back to English, right? So it goes the other way around as well. Luckily, I married a Malaysian wife, not as a result of that, but she does help me to translate a lot of things. But I think when it comes to strategy for companies, whether it's startups or scale-ups or corporates, I think it's important to take those language barriers into account, right? And that you start to cater to the masses and not just to a small portion like the T20 in Malaysia, for example. So language is definitely an important part. And when it comes to corporate strategies, right, or business strategies, I mean, Subhash, how do you see, for example, in a Maybank or any other corporation that you work with, how does this digitalization strategy fit in a wider business strategy?
I guess you would see a growing need for it to be kind of critical. I think back then maybe it would have been a component. It's one of those things you talked about in a list of 10 agenda items. Might be one of the things. Okay, let's talk about digitalization. But now, if you looked at it from that context, it would have moved up the ranking. It would be number one. What are we doing on the digital front? So, and now every business line in an organization will be faced with the same question: how are you converting your business into to become more digital, right? No matter what you're doing, and it could be enabling function like or back office function like human resources, risk, compliance. It could be any of those support functions as well. How are you looking at digital transformation? So it's become a topic that's almost a must-have, and it's always there, as opposed to before it was more of just an agenda item on running a few projects to complete that quota of digital transformation.
Yeah, and of course, the pandemic has accelerated that as well. And remember at the beginning of COVID, when our university had to shut down, right, during the lockdown, and suddenly, I think within a span of, I believe, 2 to 3 weeks, all the lecturers had to put everything, all their curricula, all their content online and start teaching online, which was, I think, already a very scary thing for some lecturers who are not used to, to teach to such a, wide audience online, and you don't really know like who's listening. But it had to happen anyway, right? So, I mean, Peter, from your side, have you got any views on this, on how digitalization fits in a corporate business strategy?
Yeah, I guess from an organizational standpoint, right? Maybe even 5 years ago, like what Subhash had alluded, is that list of 10 things, and then digitalization is one of the agenda that just before lunch we would address that. If you look at the organization structure, you begin to see that they're starting, the larger organizations at least would have innovation teams being set up, and they become part and parcel of the organizational structure. It could be it can be HR, finance, and it could be a business development team or a change team or even a corporate innovation team. So this narrative or this initiative has become mainstream already. I won't be surprised that a lot of companies now have a separate division, and that role is as important as its finance or HR or operations and the other key components. So that in itself gives recognition that we have to think about digitalization and how our organization is being impacted by all this change. Like, for example, if Subhash gives an example of a bank, someone said that did a study, I think on McKinsey, that there are easily 1,000 companies hitting HSBC on their business model. So if you are not aware of it and you are not conscious of it, like they say, death by 1,000 cuts. Yeah. So we need to look at the impact and how are we reacting or even driving that change.
Yeah. And maybe Peter, staying with you, right? Because I know you're quite passionate as well about innovation strategies, right? How do you see? I mean, we now sort of concluded that, of course, digitalization is very much part and parcel of the DNA of a business strategy. But now people also talk about having an innovation strategy, which may not be the same thing, but how do you see that overlap, right? This innovation strategy and having digitalization part of that with the business strategy. Is it in sync, or are these completely different things?
Yeah, it's definitely in sync. So as leaders or us as managers of our company, we need to probably look at what is the direction that our company wants to achieve, what are the things which is impacting us, and then we need to see how we're going to address that or reach that strategy. Because when we talk about innovation, I think it's quite an overused word, right? Even like, wow, everybody's talking about innovation. Actually, if you look at innovation, it can be simplified into, doing things differently. It can be a product, it can be a service, or it can be a business model. So all of us, we must think about how do we make our next change or react or even drive that change. So this innovation, big word, must tie into my corporate long-term strategy. So what is it that we want to achieve? Yeah, because I can do innovation. It can be a process innovation. I've got a factory. I want to innovate from taking 20 hours, it becomes 2 hours to do something. So that is what we call incremental innovation. Yeah. So there is some efficiency involved in that. But for the longer term, we got to find out what are the things that we need to change, either a product or a service or even a business model that needs to cater for what we want to achieve in the long run.
Yeah. Okay. Subhash, any views from your side on this, on the innovation strategy and the importance there?
Yeah, I mean, from big lessons learned is there are multiple, like what Peter said, right? I mean, innovation comes in the form of incremental innovation and all the way to the moonshots. And then it may, scope-wise, it might involve products, it might involve processes, it might involve the bigger pieces like services, right? So one of the biggest lessons we learned was we as an organization, and a lot of organizations do this, we have an innovation arm that looks at innovation being driven from a specific arm of the organization, which is good, right? But the challenge then becomes, because that arm exists, then the job of innovation then becomes their responsibility as opposed to the rest of the organization. So one of the lessons learned is if you have that, you need to quickly find a way to involve everyone in the organization or innovation, and you have to recognize all sorts of innovation. Even if it's incremental, celebrate those incremental innovations. If it's moonshot, get more people involved in moonshot innovations. Although capability may be an issue, some people may not be able to do that. Capacity may be an issue because they're involved in their regular activities. They cannot do a new project altogether, but involving everyone in the journey might be probably a better option, because then you kind of take the whole organization forward as opposed to, yeah.
Yeah, no, I completely echo that. That innovation is not just one person's job or one department's job. It should be in everyone's job description. But oftentimes you still see that these strategies are driven from the top down, right? Because the senior management, the CEO, they understand why they need to do that. But sometimes people on the ground level, they don't really understand like why they need to innovate. What's the purpose of this? What are the sort of things that you have seen that maybe works well to also bring in or to include these people from the ground up, right? Or how do you do or encourage innovation that happens from the ground up instead of just from the top down?
Well, I mean, I think all employees are motivated by something. A lot of them are motivated. There would be intrinsic motivations for them to want to do something, right? You can't tell them, let's all come together and increase the shareholder equity. No one's going to be excited, right? But if you told them how you're going to be involved in this and how it's in a way beneficial to you as well as an individual. I like Dan Pink's three intrinsic motivations for individuals to stay in a company or stay employed: mastery, autonomy, and purpose. Right? Mastery is about always having opportunity to grow in terms of learning. And then autonomy is being able to decide for yourself on doing something, as opposed to being always instructed or always being told to do something. Right? I can make that decision on my own. That's autonomy. The third one, which I want to talk about as to answer your question, is purpose. So a lot of organizations in Malaysia, unfortunately, right, and especially the larger organizations, have not clearly stated their purpose in terms of a vision or a mission. A lot of them have done it as more of an academic exercise in order to fill up a website to say, okay, this is what the vision and mission is. But it is not, they have never taken it seriously enough. If I had created a vision statement which I can get my entire organization to align to, and this can be a recruitment strategy, this could be a retention strategy, this could be an innovation strategy. So examples of fantastic vision statements, it doesn't have to be one line, or it doesn't have to be 2-3 words, but it can be any length. TED, for example, right? TED has this vision mission statement that says spread ideas, full stop, right? Now, when you have something as inspirational as that, your organization, and as an employee in the organization, I'm going to be very proud to be part of that. I'm going to see that vision as also my vision, right? As being in the organization. So my mastery, autonomy, and purpose is now kind of aligned towards that, and I want to grow. So innovation then becomes a bit more natural. So spread ideas. Oh, okay, you know what? My organization wants to spread ideas. This is the things I can think of. Of course, vision statement is not the only thing that needs to be there. A lot of other things need to be in place, but that could be one practical thing that could be worked on.
Okay. Maybe just add a quick one, Matt, is that thanks, Subhash. Like when I agree with Rosalind, when you say agree on the purpose as the core in driving innovation, right? If any of us who are cyclists, you will know the helmet called Giro, Giro. And their purpose is, believe it or not, the tagline is save lives. Yeah, save lives, because that's their purpose. And you say, why you save lives? They say that if you go to their factory and their offices, they will show you that people using their helmet, and their tagline is that I would rather you break the helmet than you break your head. Yeah. So every innovation that they have, every product which they do, and all the service related to it was on the, like what Rosalie said, purpose. The purpose is to save lives. So safety was very key in all they do and all their services, right? And the other thing that would drive people, Matt, is that when we were running organizations, and also one CEO recently told us, is that he said, we have got this mid-belly syndrome. The head is very clear. That means the CEO is very clear. But when it goes down, the belly has got a lot of fat, right? So that's where the middle management just don't want to move. So how do you get to move? And the two things which normally drives people, apart from what Subhash said about the MAPs, right? I would call it, I just coined it for just now, is the burning platform syndrome. Yeah, the burning platform syndrome is that, say for example, when we were running, the photocopying revenue was coming down because people were not printing as much. So the company had to move. So when the head talks about it, the mid-belly here, we must convince them the burning platform. And secondly, is more of the purpose, right? We talked about. But in my case, and then in one other consulting work which we were doing, is actually the burning platform. So people say, wow, we really got to change. So that was, I thought I could share with everyone.
Yeah, thanks for that. And I don't know why I'm thinking about, but the belly part is getting bigger and bigger, especially during this pandemic, right? So it's about kind of the bloated part, which is sometimes also the bloated part in an organization, right? That needs to be trimmed down the quickest in order to make any change. Yeah. But it's easy to me sometimes to talk about like setting purpose, right? And then of course, it's super important, but really to get it down, especially in organizations like Sunway, for example, or Maybank, where you talk about tens of thousands or sometimes hundreds of thousands of employees. How do you really get people to understand that person and to live up to that, right? And to feel excited about it? I guess the communication is super important there. And I think the same thing, Subhash, is with other things like culture, right? Like people talk all about like, oh, we need to set the right culture. Our staff need to have more growth mindsets. And And, and sometimes senior managers talk about it as if it can just happen overnight. But, from your experience, how do you see that, how important is culture, right? And mindset of the staff, and how do you really drive that within an organization?
Yeah, true. I mean, growth mindset is something everyone talks about, right? And culture, but those are all really big words, which if you don't make it more practical, no one's going to be able to relate. Like, okay, let's just take an example of agile, right? And a lot of organizations are in that mode to carry out agile as a shift in the way they work. So agile, in a way, if you looked at it as a mindset, there are 4 values within the agile, right? So you got one which is quite critical, is responding to changes over following a plan. So even if I were to look at just that one value, and how does that translate as a mindset shift for an organization? If I'm going to implement enable being able to become lot more responsive to changes as opposed to following a plan, then just like what Peter said, the mid belly, you need to look at how everyone is now driven by a plan after plan after plan, right? It starts with one major Gantt chart and then a sub Gantt chart and another Gantt chart, and everyone is just tracking everyone by that, right? So one of the key changes in that would be when you have a team that's executing tasks, you don't question the how. As a leader or as anyone in the belly, you do not question the how. You let the team execute on their own. Let them have autonomy in execution. Can you stay away from instructing them on details? And that is a major change, because if as a manager for about 20-30 years in an organization, I'm so used to telling my staff about exactly what I want you to do step by step, and being there for every sort of questions they may have. Like, for example, do I use this template for this Excel, or do I use something else? Do I change this field? So, those kind of details, if I'm so used to instructing people, to make them change and ask them to step back and say, do not get involved in that, it's actually very tough. It's almost like parenting, right? As your child grows up, initially you were very detailed and you were checking on everything. That time where you have to just let go, it is not easy. So that I think is one of those examples of something that's very tough to do. It's easy to talk about as a growth mindset, a mindset shift, but to do is actually very tough. And it takes some time. It's not something that happens overnight.
Yeah, I fully agree. Peter, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, you also have back good question in terms of what we say culture, right? There's a whole thing behind culture, but it also addresses what Aslam's question is, because when you ask us, how do we identify innovation? You said, how can we identify the innovation was a success before the corporate does? It's a matter of, again, like we say, mindset, right? If you see a problem, then if we reframe it to a setting, how might we do something, right? Let's say, for example, if we go to a queue in a government department, say, how might we make the customer experience better? If you can have that little mindset like that, this is also our culture of openness and don't pass judgment and all that stuff. If we can just reframe, how might we, then innovation can happen. That is only a change in mindset. So we say, how might we make the Rakyat's experience at JPJ queuing up better? So with that mindset, already innovation can happen. Yes, you said that big corporations, yes, they do that because they have already ingrained in their own mind that, hey, we need to think it differently. If we do the same thing as we do yesterday, then we'll always be having the same outcome. So it's a deliberate attempt by companies and also even us as individuals to think on a more open basis. That is what one example of a culture change.
Yeah.
In that sense.
Yeah. So we got some questions coming in from Facebook again, from the Facebook Live, and some people talk about technology, right? And they sometimes confuse it with innovation. And people talk about technology sometimes that it will replace particular roles within a business, right? But oftentimes what technology does, it augments, right? Or it accelerates certain functions. So such as sales, PR, business development. What are your thoughts on that? Any examples what you've seen that, technology didn't necessarily replace these kind of people at the front line, but actually help them to do their job better or faster? Do you have any examples of that? Subhash, maybe?
I guess the one example I can think of is where it didn't, that the innovation did not involve technology, is things like how as a frontliner, a sales person, how you would approach a sales differently, and this innovation has been happening since sales ever even existed, right? But even now things are changing. Like, for example, how do we talk to customers differently from what we normally do? How can we close a sale differently? So it doesn't necessarily involve in technology, but innovation can still happen in the services front without the need for innovation. So like in agile coaching, for example, if you were to look at innovation in agile, the coaching aspect of it is about how do you listen to someone and allow and be comfortable with silence, for example, right? Someone like me, as a self-confessed extrovert, it's very difficult to be comfortable with silence. So where you ask a question and you wait for an answer, and the answer doesn't come, you tend to fill the void, you kind of with your thoughts and stuff like that. So things like that don't involve technology at all, but that is something that we have to learn. And I would still think that learning that is innovation as well, right? Because you are being able to connect with other humans better. Your connection is much better, and you can sell better. Your relationship improves as well.
Maybe I just add before maybe Pedro comes in, which is already in. Is I think technology, right? It will help us make better decisions. And back to what Habib said earlier on, I would just mention is that when we have got digitalization of our business, there will be some disruption in terms of how humans are being impacted. Like, if my job is going to be taken away by a robot, but our skills has to change, right? So we become more analytical in that sense. So I think when there is technology involved, yes, sometimes the humans would be impacted, but in certain jobs, we still need human, like what Habib says. I feel that the insurance side, the life insurance, is very much a personal business. So even though with the advent of technology, we still need the people, but the skills that may have to change. One example, very quick one, is that, for example, whilst we use a lot of machine learning and AI, say in the medical field, right, to spot certain sickness, you still need doctors, right, to have the empathy bit. The machines cannot do it. So certain jobs, like what Habib is half suggesting, we still need people. Can you imagine a judge? Yeah, he may use AI to scan all the case laws, but he needs to have his human judgment. So his role may probably change. So technology is helping, but then what is now my new job scope in that sense? I still need people. So I don't think that, the only workers who permanently has got no job because of technology are the horses. Humans can change, and we can always learn something and be aware of how this impacts us. Sorry, but a roundabout way of doing it.
No, I agree, Peter. You can't expect, just technology just because it sounds sexy, right? Like, the buzzwords like AI or what have you, blockchain, and plug it in and expect that to be a panacea, right? And that's somehow the organization is going to thrive after that. Education and the skills development are critical, right? So definitely, I think the role of universities or other education institutions that can provide short courses that are very pragmatic and how people can use technology and develop their skills are going to be even more important than they even were 5-10 years ago. So at this stage, I just welcome our third panelist to the coffee session here. Pedro, hi, welcome, thanks for joining us. Maybe, we just did a quick introduction, like a 1 minute of ourselves as well. Maybe you want to do a 1 minute on like who you are and what you do.
So my name is Pedro Uría. I was living in Malaysia for the last 7 years, but I have just left and I am in Thailand now. In Malaysia, I was for 6 years part of Axiata Group, which is a telecom conglomerate and digital conglomerate in many countries in Southeast Asia beyond Malaysia. My last role there was group head of data and AI. And now I am in Thailand in True Digital Group, which is the digital services division of True. True is a telecom operator in Thailand, and I am Chief Analytics and AI Officer. True Digital Group is very interesting. I mean, the approach to innovation that True has is very interesting for this workshop because it's a digital services division for the telecom operator, and is a unit that is incubating different businesses, IoT, cybersecurity, video streaming, and analytics, and running the analytics one. And yeah, I think it's very interesting to analyze how this approach to innovation works. There are other approaches as well, like corporate venture building, corporate venture capital, etc. And yeah, so I'm very excited to talk about these different approaches with you.
Yeah, well, I didn't realize you actually moved to Thailand already. It's a loss for the country in Malaysia, to see you go somewhere else. But
as soon as they let me go back to Malaysia without quarantine, I will go.
Okay, yeah, that'd be good. So maybe just just to also update you what we've done, like with the first part of the panel, right? We talked a little bit, or we demystified the word digitization and digitalization, what the differences are and how that forms part of innovation strategies, business strategies within organizations. We talked a little bit about culture, mindset, and also the importance of setting the right purpose, right? To get not just the top management involved, but also really the people at the middle management or even on the ground, right? How do you get them excited about innovation and digitalization strategies that they set? So maybe shifting gears now and moving to the second part of the panel. I mean, let's talk a little bit about maybe broader corporate innovation strategies. Of course, entrepreneurship is one of the strategies, right? That people can use. But let's talk a little bit more from the outside in, right? And how corporates can engage with startups, innovators, and other entrepreneurs. Pedro, maybe starting with you, like maybe from your experience in Axiata, what are sort of models that you have seen, and what sort of tools in the toolbox did Axiata have or other organizations you work with?
There are different approaches. Let me mention maybe 4 of them. One approach is partnerships with startups, right? So you engage with a startup that is going to provide you services for your core business, or maybe you are going to approach an opportunity together with some kind of revenue sharing. So that's partnerships, number 1. Number 2 will be investing into startups. So you can have a corporate venture capital approach where you look for startups in areas of a strategic interest to your company, and you make investments into those startups. It can be small investments, like typically if you do an accelerator and you're investing in very small amounts in very early stage companies, or it can be larger investments into Series A, Series B, etc. Those investments typically in corporate venture capital might not be controlling investments, right? Because you're just one of the multiple investors. And the other approach will be corporate venture building, which is I'm not going to invest into a startup. I'm going to build a startup myself. So I'm going to create a separate legal entity where I am going to incubate a business. In order to do that, I need to have very separate policies from my core business, because it's a completely different world from an HR perspective, from a financial perspective, etc. It has to be completely separate and completely different. And I can build a startup and grow it, right? In Malaysia, Axiata has done that multiple times, corporate venture building. ADA, which is I'm no longer there, but it's the former advertising company of Axiata, was corporate venture building. Boost, which is one of the largest e-wallets in Malaysia, was corporate venture building. Axiata also did corporate venture capital. Many corporates in Malaysia have done corporate venture capital. And partnerships is I believe a lot of companies in Malaysia also have done partnerships. Is probably the easiest approach. I would say these are the three different ways that you could, the three different main ways that you could approach external innovation in a corporate.
Yeah. So many touch points for startups to engage with a corporate. Of course, not every corporate is like Axiata or what we're doing in Sunway or companies like Petronas. I think a lot of the companies are still at the very early stages, right, to build up their corporate tools.
Correct.
But in terms of the engagement with startups, right? I mean, I always talk about the tango, right, between startups and corporates. There's a lot of frictions, right? There's a lot of times when someone stands on someone else's toes, right, and the dance is not as smooth as you hoped it would be. Because theoretically, for startups to engage with corporates makes sense, right? To make use of their networks, their skill, and it could accelerate things much faster. But in reality, I think that doesn't always happen, right? Well, what are the things, Pedro, maybe starting with you again first, because you're getting you up to speed in this panel. What are the things you've seen are the main friction points why these things didn't work out?
There are a number of frictions. Some VCs actually recommend startups not to get a corporate investor until a later stage. Some VCs recommend that until Series B or C, until a later stage, not at the beginning. Other companies, other startups have done it successfully from the beginning. So I think it depends. Typically, I would say, number one, one of the mistakes corporates do is they try to control the startup. They try to impose strategic objectives of the corporate onto the startup, which should be driven by the growth of the startup itself, not the growth of the corporate. The startup should look at itself only, not at the corporate, right? So sometimes the corporate make that mistake of having or trying to influence the startup too much. On the flip side, what they should do is trying to help the startup by providing assets that the corporate has in terms of customer base, in terms of data, in terms of financing, in terms of talent, but not try to control it. That's one issue. Another issue that I have seen is sometimes the corporate tries to impose policies or ways of, I wouldn't say policies, ways of working into the startup that do not work with startups. I'm thinking about support functions in general. The support functions of a corporate wouldn't be able to support a startup. Support functions of a company will stop a startup from growing. HR policies of a corporate are very different from those that you need in a startup. Financial policies, procurement, all these kind of things. If you try to leverage the shared functions of a corporate for the startups, that's typically not working. And the same thing could happen when you try to impose like a very detailed forecasting or planning, business planning into the startup. So if you ask the startup, give me a 3-year plan, that's the wrong question to ask, because the startup is never going to provide a 3-year plan. And if they make it just for For a steerco, is a waste of time. The startups will be experimenting with customers, trying different approaches, and discovering where is the product market fit for that startup, which is something the corporates don't do. Yeah, so these are some of the areas that I think that the relation can get sour. But if the corporate focuses on providing assets that help the startup to grow, that is a much healthier and much proven approach for success.
Yeah, and I recently heard this term, the Buxton Index. I mean, which is really what you said, right? Is the time or that people take for that planning, right? And corporates, it can be 3 years, sometimes longer. Startups, you talk about weeks, months, right? So that finding that alignment is very important. And I think I agree. There's a lot of friction happening there. Not to speak even about, when you start talking about legal agreements, right? Like where corporates can take a very long time, and the deal or the startups have already moved on to do other things. So maybe that's one side, I think, of the equation, right? Or of the tango dance partners. On the other side, the startup side, Peter, maybe moving to you, what are sort of the mistakes, I would say, that you see that startups are making when they try to engage corporates? So where are the frictions where they can maybe improve on making this relationship more successful?
I guess taking on from what Pedro said, I mean, there are various shades of partnerships, right? But of course, it's a matter of collaboration with another party. Yeah, in its basic essence, is working with another party. I jot down a couple of things. So at the end of the day, it's almost like you want to know what this partner is all about, right? So as much as the corporates, maybe from Pedro's side, want to understand how the startup thinks to make sure that the friction is not there in terms of the policies and so on. And I think it's also incumbent on the startup to also know what is it that they want to achieve from this partnership, be it a partnership or another investor coming in. What value does or will the corporate add? So let's be clear before we get into this marriage, so to speak, or even this dating game. So know what is your contribution into the partnership as much as what the corporate is bringing, we will bring to the table, and have that conversation up front and be very clear. And whatever friction that you may think it is, let's set it out on the table. And then as we go, we need to have that conversations. I guess in a lot of ways, I'm just putting this into some mathematical formula, which I saw this. It's that when we go into a partnership, we must 1 + 1 must equals to be 3, right? Or else why? Yeah. But be clear, what is the startup's contribution? So sometimes when I work with the startups as well and together with corporates, we are not so clear. We are too shy to talk about it at the upfront. So if the startup is bringing 1.7, the value of 1.7, a company like say Sunway, what are you bringing in? 1.3. What are you bringing in? Let's have that conversation to make it a 3. And then the important thing is that how do we make sure that us as startup work with a corporate to work as one team? I think this all have got to be ironed out. And the problem with startups I can see is that they will want to work with true digital solutions, and then when they see Sunway is good, okay, I will also work. So how can this focus be put into proper focus in that sense? So I think what I'm saying in a nutshell is that we as a startup must also understand what value we bring to the table, what's the working relationship, yeah, and then thirdly, to make sure that it's a continuous iteration and conversation, and don't have too many girlfriends. I think it's too difficult to manage. I think that is where spoils the relationship. Yeah. Thanks.
No, yeah, these are some very good points, Peter, that you make, and I think maybe just to add on to that, right? I think some startups think that they are working with the corporates, right, with the Axiata, with the Sunway, but that's very untrue, because you're actually working with people in the organization, and it's really important for a startup to find the right people to work with, right? Like in some business units, you have innovation champions, right? Like just people are just more open to work with startups, right? And then that can help the startups to really find a way within the big organizations. They are like that conscience, right? To make things work. And I think oftentimes I think startups don't really understand how the corporates, how they are organized, and that people have their KPIs and are not always bothered with, again, with innovation, right? So it's really about also for the startups finding the right person to champion their project and to really to make that successful. But maybe just building up what Pedro said earlier, and then maybe getting Subhash involved in this as well. I think there's also a point to be made about like what stage of development, you find most success for the startup, right? To be brought into a corporate, whether it's from an investment perspective or a partnership. And definitely, I mean, from what I've seen, and maybe Subhash, you have a different experience with that. But what I've seen is that, especially for the sort of the incremental innovation, right? The Horizon 1 innovations, typically corporates would like to work with more established companies or scale-ups that are already past the Series B. They figure out how to do it. They have the solution and you can just plug it in, right? They don't want to take any risks there. But when you move on to maybe the Horizon 2 and 3, right? We think about, working with startups to go into new markets or to develop new products or to do things that we don't really know anything about, right? Then it's make more sense to work with more earlier stage startups that you can still mold into, certain propositions that work for the corporates. How have you seen that, Subhash, in terms of, stage of development of the startups, and especially, working on things like digitalization or digital transformation projects?
So kind of very similar to what you just said. I think with Maybank, when we did a lot of these partnerships, we had better success with the more scaling stage companies. But one thing we notice is as the startup is more mature and you start partnering them, the relationship becomes more of a vendor relationship. I'm buying a service from you. It becomes a lot more structured in terms of what you can bring to the table, what I can bring to the table. So it becomes a lot more like how a corporate normally kind of gets onto a vendor and says, this is what I want to do. So this is a term of agreement, and this is what I want you to do for me, and this is what I bring to the table, right? But with the early stage startups, what I found very interesting was they come in with an initial idea, which they may not have firmly agreed on as a business model yet. But it's at an idea stage, and they say, this is what I'm really passionate about. But when they come into this conversation with you, you tend to have a lot more room to kind of discuss where we can take this together. It becomes a lot more in terms of a partnership and forming a new MVP or a new product that you can come together and say, this is ours, as opposed to the more mature startups where they are more firm about what they bring to the table. And let's work together to how you can use this product or this service in your organization. So I guess that's where the difference. We've seen success on both, but more so on what you just said. It's more so on the scalable side, the scaling startups.
Yeah. And maybe moving back to you, Pedro, as well, right? What have you seen in terms of, I mean, people always talk about like doing pilots, right? Doing a lot of pilots as if that's sort of the end goal. But in terms of doing pilots with startups, again, what are the sort of the main ingredients that both corporates and startups need to think about before they embark on something like that?
The difficult part of doing pilots is scaling up the pilots. Is always scaling up the pilots, both with startups or in internal digitization efforts. Pilots typically work because if you are doing a pilot with a startup, probably that startup is putting a lot of effort. They are seeing you as a serious client. Pilots typically work, even internally, right? If you are doing digital transformation, sometimes corporates do that with consultants, right? And those pilots typically work. But how do you scale up the pilot? That's the difficult thing, because scaling up something that is maybe a 1 month or 2 month pilot into a full-fledged prototype that might require more financial resources, that might require maybe bigger involvement of your sales force, depending if it is related to sales, depending on what the pilot is. Scaling up is very difficult because that forces you to prepare a structure and a commitment that you don't need for the pilot. And that's the difficult thing, right? So doing a lot of corporates do multiple pilots at the same time, but I think that sometimes they are missing that some of those pilots will have to be scaled up.
Yeah, well, what are the sort of important metrics in these pilots, right? So to ensure that there is a more likelihood that the pilot will succeed and will scale up within the organization. What are the things that you need to measure during the pilot?
I'm trying to think about it. I mean, I guess the KPIs will be the standard KPIs that any startup will have about how many customers you are acquiring and how those customers, I'm thinking in this example as a B2C startup, maybe in a B2B startup, it might be different, right? But let's stick to B2C. Typically, a startup that is B2C is going to have KPIs about the pipeline or the pipeline of clients and how clients are moving to different stages of that pipeline, right? Because that is what is showing you the growth potential. And probably in a pilot like that, you should focus on that kind of KPIs that are showing you the growth potential, right? So it should be KPIs that show you how you are moving into the different stages of the startup, like problem validation, product market fit, then scale up. I think these kind of operational KPIs.
Yeah, and actually, from what I'm attending a lot of these conferences when people talk about pilots and scaling them up and making them successful, I still see, I'm not sure what the other panelists are saying, but that in Malaysia, I think the conversation is still a lot about like matchmaking, connecting startups with corporates, but not really thinking about what's the next step, right? So the pilot will be the next step. Funding the pilot is important, setting the right metrics, and then really bringing them into a corporate in the organization. And I think there's still a lot of knowledge and education that people need to win in, right? Both from the corporate side as well as the startup side. Sorry, just throwing this out here. We didn't prepare anything of these kind of questions, but maybe Peter as a note as well, like for MBAN to and for other agencies to think about these kind of programs as well.
Yeah, I guess one you brought up an interesting point that since we are in MBAN, we probably need to look at how do we address this, because from a corporate standpoint, we work in corporate, right? The first thing is that, you want me to do the pilot? Okay, the pilot, Pedro said, is great. What's after that, right? So the startup must understand what's next. Yeah, after this, I mean, we need to think about this. Okay, assuming that is done, what is the KPI? Corporates will surely ask about KPI because they're putting money, their resources, and their time in it, right? Back to what Pedro said, what is important, even maybe for MBAN, we need to look at how we can help educate, quote unquote, because when you talk about innovation and working, the matrix is no longer just it's a different KPI. If you are at the early stage, like what Pedro said, you're trying to validate whether people like it or not, right? So that's hence from an accounting standpoint, which I was in the early days, we need to look at the innovation accounting. Yeah, I think that is something which we need to help educate, quote unquote, both sides, especially the corporates, as to how do you account for success at a different stage of working with startups. So at the early stage, you can't expect him to put a 3-year projection plan. He doesn't know, but he can say that what I want to do is to get 1,000 users on it and then conversion of 10% or something, just to validate that. I know I'm going a bit roundabout, but innovation accounting is very important education for corporates to understand.
Yeah,
thanks.
Yeah, agree. Yeah, and so maybe just slightly shifting gears here. I see there's a question as well from Facebook that came in and talked a little bit. I mean, we are talking a lot about what are the sort of ingredients, right, to make innovation successful, but sometimes it comes down to serendipity or luck. Sebastian, any views from your side on that, on how that has played out in your organizations that you worked with or anywhere else that you've heard?
Totally agree. I think sometimes it's just about, being there at the right time in the right place. At that time when, as an organization, you're embarking on a certain strategy and a startup just happens to knock on your door and you go like, okay, this is perfect. You know what we want to do right now, and what is really a learning platform, like what Peter said right now for our organization, is something that you can help with. So perfect, right? Timing is perfect. So that kind of also is luck, but there's I think I read this book once where luck is what you see, but what you need to do a lot of work to create that luck. So as a startup, for example, you need to keep asking that question. You need to keep pitching. You need to keep knocking on doors. And like what you said, Matt, right? It's about the people that you work within the organization. If this one person is difficult to work with, or you're not getting anywhere with that one person in the organization, can you approach someone else, right? Can you talk to someone else? You need to keep asking that question. And then the luck may happen, right? So, but you have to persevere in order to get that luck. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, very true, very true. So actually, one of the questions I wanted to ask, and I was really, wanted to get your views on this, is on the topic of like ESG, right? Environmental, social, and governance, which is a very hot topic now around the world, of course. And a lot of corporates are embracing it or embedding it within their strategies. Sometimes it's more talk than actually walking the walk, right? But yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I'm observing now, also in Malaysia, right? That's a lot of these ESG conversations. They start at like the fund managers, right? The limited partners, or from the public market exchanges, right? So the corporates need to follow, right, what they are saying, because that's where they get the money from. And now what I'm seeing playing out is that the VCs, the venture capitalists, are picking up on it, because their investors are the corporates or the pension funds who are now imposing some of these ESG metrics on them. And the next step now is that the VCs are now talking to the startups about what they are measuring, right, in ESG. And of course, being a startup and very limited in resources, they don't have these frameworks and strategies or committees, right, set up to talk about this. But it's something I'm actually very passionate about, and we are trying to make a difference there. In our accelerator, we did select our startups based on some of these sustainable and social measures, and we asked them to start measuring some of the things, even small things about how many flights do you take a year, right? And a reduction in flights, how does that translate into carbon emissions, things like that, or electricity costs within your company. What are you guys seeing, this playing out? Maybe, either on the corporate side or on the startup side. Are people taking this serious, and what are sort of the things that you've seen that are working well into that field?
If you want, I can start briefly. I think there are a lot of startups that are playing in the ESG field by, for example, providing analytical solutions that corporates can use to track ESG, or IT solutions that corporates can use to track ESG. So there are a lot of startups that are creating products in the ESG area, I would say. And a lot of these products is new. That means that there is less competition and there is an opportunity, right? So some areas are already very much invested. If we think about, I don't know, e-commerce, unless you have something that is very special or very verticalized, a lot of that has been done, right? But in ESG is new, so that's why there are opportunities. Regarding measuring ESG metrics in the startups, in order to decide an investment. I'm not sure. I think it will depend probably on the startup. It will probably depend on the size of the startup. Probably makes more sense for bigger ones in Series B. I don't have a clear opinion about that, but it is true that a lot of startups are actually playing in the ESG arena, building products for that.
Yeah, yeah. Peter, the views from your side?
You know, I was just smiling and listening. But you know why? You know, ESG as a terminology, if I ask everybody here, what do you understand as ESG, right? It's almost like, what is innovation? You ask 6 people to tell you 6 different definitions of what innovation is, right? So I look at ESG as an opportunity for a lot of the startups, and I see some creative startups, quote unquote, right, and starting to pivot a little bit to make sure that they somehow fit into somebody's definition of what ESG is all about. So to me, I smile because a few of my startups, they ask me, so is this ESG-able or not? We thought, yeah, maybe. And we start to talk to corporates, and we say, hey, this is an ESG-ish type of a project. And they say, yeah, why not? You know why? Because if for corporates now, if it's part of ESG, then they are more willing to work with you. If you say this is some charitable thing, people are not so open about it. So when it has got this ESG slant, yeah, we get quite a lot of more company being more affable to that idea. I'm just saying this on a very creative way. So for those startups in our FP, if you see there's an opportunity for you to ride on this ESG theme, whatever that means, you know, it's an opportunity for you to work with companies because they do have this agenda and also sometimes the budget and the people to work with. Thanks.
Yeah. Subhash, do you have anything to add to that?
No expert on ESG, but like what Peter said, it's very broad. There are a lot of aspects to it. But what I'm interested is in a lot of these social entrepreneurs. I think even Magic has a whole lineup of social entrepreneurship. They had started this program quite a long time back, but those sort of startups, maybe corporates should start looking at how we can partner with them, right? Because they are founded on the idea of ESG, on the elements of ESG. So how can we work with them to generate, make it a business, right? For example, because ESG can easily fall, if not taken care of, it can easily fall into this charity bucket where we have allocations every year, and it becomes a CSR as opposed to ESG. So ESG has to be a lot more sustainable. So maybe if you're looking at startup partnerships, maybe social entrepreneurship could be an angle.
Yeah, yeah. So those are, I think, some of the direct impacts, right, that you're seeing. But I mean, definitely, I think ESG also is a big term, and a lot of people think directly about the social part or about the environmental part, right, the green part. But the G is actually the easiest to get started with, right? Because these are things like you're having a proper board of directors, how many females are in your staff versus male, like, I mean, some of these things can easily be done. But actually, one of the points I just want to make here to the startups listening is that the VCs are picking up on this. And it's just going to be, I think, another 1-2 years that in your pitch deck, you do need to address that. And you can't just say, I'm just addressing very, big, broad goal of sustainable development, but you really need to show the data on how you've actually been incorporating this in your business, how you're measuring it, and what the real impact is around that. And I think everyone, again, has a role to play here, right? So it can't just be, put on the shoulders of social entrepreneurs. It should be everyone from government to corporates to startups, and even the educators, I would say. So, with that, I have, no more question. I don't see any new questions coming in from the chats here. Peter, you want to add?
Can I just add? Yeah, I think you just had an interesting point, because I'm doing quite a bit of work for MIT ASB, the Asian School of Business, right? When you mentioned sustainability, when you want to have innovation, they always say that you need to have feasibility, desirability, and viability, right? And so there's a new circle. They call it sustainability. So now everyone in all these professional courses and all this, they are asking you to build in sustainability because everyone is looking at it. Like you mentioned VCs, right, Matt? Um, um, I saw a statistic I read just a few days ago that last year for the ESG theme, corporates have been, well, the VCs have put in 51 billion US dollars into this theme. So big market, and don't ignore the ESG bit.
Yes, yeah. Great. Yeah, no, thanks for that, Peter. Okay. Any of the other panelists, before I close down, any final thoughts or any other advice you just want to give here to either the startups or the corporates? Sebastian, any final thoughts, final words?
Nothing different from, I think, what we all shared so far. Yeah, I mean, I think the only thing I can probably say is seeing from all the unsuccessful partnerships is think of it as a marriage proposal. You get into a marriage and, you think of it as you're getting in bed with a partner, and how can you make that relationship last, right? So it's about the people in the startup and the people in the organization. So then that perspective, you see it beyond just that one product that you need to partner on.
Yeah. Pedro, anything from you?
I think probably what is important is to keep a separation between the startup and the corporate in terms of working styles, in terms of policies, in terms of probably financial metrics. So keeping a very clear separation, but at the same time being able to collaborate on the business side. So keeping this separation while having an arm's length relation between the two is important, and it's difficult because it's kind of the dilemma of what has to be separate and what has to be joined, and making the right decision here is important. If the decision is made in the wrong way, you might end up overwhelming the startup, and that is something that you wouldn't want. You want to help the startup to grow and eventually deliver opportunities for the core business, but those opportunities are not going to come that early. So if you push the envelope too much, that might not work.
Right. Yeah. Thanks, Pedro. Peter, any final words from you?
I think my two esteemed colleagues here say quite a lot of great things. And for me, just to add on, is that when you want to have this collaboration, right, like to use Sebastian's analogies like a marriage, right? So don't be shy to put in the prenuptial agreement as well. Yeah, upfront, because some of us, we just say, oh, we're just going to partnership and talk, and because we don't know what we're supposed to do and what the other side's supposed to do. So let's be man about this, write it down, and let's agree upfront so that the separation which Pedro is suggesting all can be made, so that this marriage can be workable. Yeah, even if we separate, we know how to separate. Yeah.
But still have the love from the beginning, right? Yeah. Okay. No, thanks, guys. And really, I think I learned a lot. I hopefully the people in the audience also picked up some new things here. I'm surprised we actually filled up 1.5 hours talking about this. It's a real coffee session, right? I think one of the last point I want to make is for the corporates who are interested to know more about corporate innovation, models of investments. I know Magic runs their own programs, but also MBAN has, as I mentioned at the beginning, as a corporate innovation chapter now and a membership. So there's some way we are members of that chapter as well, and there's a lot of opportunity for learning, networking, and ultimately to start making investments into startups. So with that, again, thanks all the panelists. Thank you everyone for listening, and I'm not sure whether I'm passing back to Magic now, but yeah, over to you, Rosalind.
All right. Hang on. Sorry. Thank you very much, Matt. So that was a lot of takeaways in there for me too, for us too on our end, that it is a marriage, this co-innovation thing, and there should be empathy and understanding on both parties from the beginning. Make it clear, make it happy for everyone, and that purpose drives it, and technology is not the innovation, but it's a driving force behind it alongside your purpose there. I guess that's it for now. We do have one last thing to do here, is to get the poll out one more time to ask the audience here on Zoom how much now that they are familiar with corporate innovation, now that they have spent about 90 minutes with us. Amma, if you are ready with the poll, can you put it out there, please? Thank you. So we have about a minute here if to have everyone in the audience to let us know how we have done for you this morning. And I see some a lot of thank yous here and a lot of thumbs up on Facebook for the panelists here today. And again, on behalf of Magic, thank you very much for spending your time with us. And also those on Zoom who's continuously with us, and on FB, we hope to see you again. We have another one here on Friday at 10 o'clock, just to close off your weekend with a 10X final series on 10X, on building a 10X organization. If you can join us then. Very good understanding. Hopefully, thank you so much for your input and your response. And again, one more time, we'd like to thank Matt and Subhash and Pedro from Bangkok, and Peter and everyone at MBAN, the team there, for this collaboration, and on our audience on Zoom and FB, and everyone on the back end for making this seamless session. We very much hope to have this again, maybe regularly, so we can keep educating and making the understanding and marriage more happy marriages from now on. Thank you so much. So one more day into the weekend, we wish everyone a good and happy and safe weekend, and thank you again from Magic. Right, thank you guys on the back end there.
Thank you,
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you.